The Victorian Age and the Characteristics of Victorian Poetry, presented by Dr. Anjani Sharma. Before I begin my discussion on the topic mentioned just now, let me bring to your notice some important facts about the queen who dominated the era, Queen Victoria. Her original name was Alexandrina Victoria. Her long reign from 1837 to 1901 defines the historical period that bears her name. She became the queen at the age of 18. She is perhaps the longest reigning queen in British history who dominated the era as a kind of cultural icon. She adopted the title of Empress of India on May 1st, 1876. She survived a number of assassination attempts over the course of her life, and her fascinating life continues to inspire storytellers. She was fluent in English and German. She also learned some Hindu and Urdu phrases. She became the first known carrier of hemophilia, a blood clotting disorder known as the royal disease. She was the first monarch to ride the train. Now the Victorian period. In the 18th century, Paris was the pivotal city of Western civilization. But by the second half of the 19th century, this center of influence had shifted to London. The Victorian era witnessed an extraordinary flowering of literary culture, comparable in many respects to what occurred during England's remarkably influential female monarch, Queen Elizabeth I. The city of London witnessed rapid growth and important developments of the age. It experienced a host of social and economic changes. Because England was the first country to become industrialized, its transformation was especially a painful one. The country was beset with a host of problems, with a shift in economy from rural agrarian to urban economy based on trade and manufacturing. The population during this time nearly doubled as the country saw economic progress. Poverty and exploitation were also equally a part of it. There was a wide gap between the rich and the poor. An early start in industrialization enabled England to capture market all over the globe, and by the end of the 19th century, England was the world's foremost imperial power. By 1890, England's colony comprised more than a quarter of all the territory on the surface of the earth. In the early 1830s, two historical events occurred of momentous consequence for England. In 1830, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened, becoming the first steam-powered public railway line in the world. The train transformed England's landscape, supported the growth of its commerce, and shrank the distances between the cities. The opening of England's first railway coincided with the opening of the country's Reform Parliament. The Reform Bill of 1832 transformed England's class structure. The bill extended the right to vote to all males owning property worth £10 or more in annual rent. This included the lower middle classes, but not the working class. The period also saw growth of slums, desperate conditions of working class, unemployment and riots. There was increasing debate about religious beliefs. One of the rationalist challenge to religious belief was utilitarianism. The term derived from the thought of Jeremy Bentham and his disciple James Mill. Charles Darwin's great treatise, The Origin of Species, reduced humankind to nothingness. Darwin's theory of natural selection conflicted not only with the concept of creation derived from the Bible, but also with the long-established assumptions of the values attached to man's special role in the world. Geological discoveries and beginning of fast railways, iron ships, looms, printing press, introduction of the telegraph, intercontinental cable, invention of photograph and postage stamp led to prosperity and enormous growth of England. Literacy increased significantly during the Victorian period. By the end of 19th century, basic literacy was almost universal. Although gender roles remained traditionally the same, a spirited debate known as the woman question eventually affected the lives of many. There were arguments and agitations for improvement in employment opportunities for women. Now, the characteristics of Victorian poetry. The reaction of various writers to the fast-paced expansion of England was various. Some relished the spectacle, celebrated the superior qualities of the English people, while other writers felt that the so-called progress has been gained by abandoning traditional rhythm of life. Some of the important poets of Victorian age are Tennyson, Robert Browning, Matthew Arnold, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Hopkins, William Morris, Swinburne, Christina Rossetti, and others. Although novel was the dominant form of Victorian literature, poets of the age sought new ways of telling stories in verse. Poetry developed in the context of novel. Tennyson's Maud, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Aurora Leigh, and Robert Browning's The Ring and the Book are the best examples. Poets took several subjects for their long narrative poems. Matthew Arnold believed in the use of heroic materials of the past. Elizabeth Barrett Browning felt that poets should represent their age. Victorian poetry also developed in the shadow of Romanticism, but it acquired a distinctive characteristics of its own. In its individualism, play of imagination, love of the picturesque, and interest in nature and the past, it continued the Romantic tradition. However, the Victorian poets wrote with a sense of belatedness and distance. Tennyson was content to follow the methods of Keats. Browning's early poems showed the influence of Shelley, and Arnold's ideal was Wordsworth. Tennyson frequently represents his muse as an embowered woman cut off from the world and doomed to death. The idea of creating a lyric poem in the voice of a speaker, ironically distinct from the poet, is a great achievement of Victorian poetry. Tennyson's genius lay in the lyric and short poem like the Palace of Art. A development to be noticed is the popularity of the dramatic monologue. In Ulysses and other pieces, Tennyson achieved some of the most successful results. Robert Browning's host of monologues, wide in range and striking in detail, are perhaps his greatest contributions to literature. The formal experimentation of Victorian poetry may make it seem eclectic, but it tends to be pictorial, using detail to construct visual images that represent the emotion or situations. Victorian poetry also uses sound in a distinctive way. The mellifluousness of Tennyson or Swinburne with its cadence, alliteration, and vowel sound is a case in point. Victorian poets also seek to represent psychology in a different way. Their most distinctive achievement is the poetry of mood and character. The pre-Raphaelite school also united several features which had not been seen before in combination. These were a fondness for medieval themes, treated in an unconventional manner with a richly colored pictorial effect. The works of Rossetti, Morris, and Swinburne provide many examples of this development of poetry. A wide range of literary style is observable in the poems of the age. Arnold's style was classic. In diction, pre-Raphaelites were simpler than Tennyson, but their vocabulary was more archaic. Women poets encountered a different set of difficulties in developing their poetic voice. Women poets view their vocation in the context of the constraints and expectations upon their sex. These, in general, are the characteristics of Victorian poetry. Thank you.